Yo, 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 peace, family. This your man's. This is Bro Rob, and I'm coming back live at y'all tonight. I feel as though I have a powerful presentation. I've been sitting on it the last couple of days, and just been fine tuning it, and looking at it and trying to basically find the space in the room to fit it on in the commentary on YouTube. So, with that being said, I have been listening to a lot of the conversations that have been going on YouTube. And, because I study history, it's a hobby of mine, it's a passion of mine. I'm a student of history. Um, Ultimately, I plan to go and continue my studies. That's something personal to me. Um, so that's something that I'm trying to do. But on tonight, I have a presentation, and the name of the presentation is called "The Basis for Black Power." One more time, the basis for Black Power. And so, um, with that being said, what I'm about to do is get into the presentation. As you come in, just let me know that you're there. I'm about to start sharing my screen. Hopefully, I got a couple of people that are going to tune in. All right. Add that. Put that up. Uh, and so I appreciate y'all patience. And right now, you know, just want to kind of highlight my homework. As I said, I have done some brushing up a lot of the research. Admittedly, I have done previously, and so I was brushing up and filling in some gaps and everything. But the name of tonight's presentations, one more time, is called "The Basis for Black Power," and what it will be is a redefinition of Black Power. Um, I'll get into the nuts and bolts of it as I go. And ultimately, what I'm hoping is we have a rediscovery of our African cultural identity. I believe is paramount for in terms of a foundation in which we can grow. And then last but not least, I'm coming from a black first ideology. And it's nothing wrong with that. And so when I say a redefinition of black power, a lot of times it's a negative connotation associated with the word black power because if you think about its inverse, white power, there is a very, very dark history with people that yell white power, you know, leading all the way back to the Ku Klux Klan. And now we talking about the White League and the Redliners and, all of these different paramilitary military groups that were operating in the South after the Civil War, the Redeemers, if you will, right? So because of all of that negative history, when you hear the word Black Power, you know, you almost forced to think about the terms white power and what that means. And so we have to master our own words, our own language, our own rhetoric. Propaganda is a weapon, and what I'm about to try to do is model how to use propaganda as a tool for our liberation, right? So, in terms of black power for us, what I'm saying is black power will equal black love. We have to love ourselves again. We have to love ourselves again, you know? And through loving ourselves, we'll love our African roots. And that is where we will identify. And ultimately, by identifying there, that will aid in our social interactions, our economic interactions, our political interactions, right? And so, I got my table of contents here. You can see I got a lot of topics that I'm gonna be talking about, and just throwing them up there on the screen. As you can see, I got quite a few things, and the reason why I'm showing my table of contents, number one, to be thorough. I don't want anybody to say, "Oh, he overlooked something," just for prosperity. If you want to come back and check Brother Rob and try to, dispute my facts and all of these types of things, okay, no problem. I'm just putting it out here so that we can see, peer review, right? If you feel like you, uh, want to check me on my facts, then, you have every right to do so. These are the topics that I will be discussing from a Black first African point of view, right? So this presentation was somewhat inspired by people whom seem to forget our unique history in the Americas. And so this meme, I found it in my phone, downloaded it to this presentation, right? This meme kind of sums up the inspiration behind the purpose and reason in doing it. And it'll be a great teaching tool for my students as well. Bunch of writing prompts in here. So, right? When Men in Black, bang, show you them, you the light and you forget everything, right? Michael Eric Dyson, I heard him say it. He say we live in the United States of amnesia, And the reason why I say that is because I hear people saying, you know, and they almost seem justified in saying it. We doing it to ourselves. You know, that may be true in some regards, but not exactly. We have to understand it in context. In context. And so in moving along, the purpose of the discussion is clearly to dissect and display how systematic racism evolved into a comprehensive system that adversely affects Africans living here in America. I want to display reactions to our progress here in America. What did the population do in terms of Black progress? Even any semblance of Black progress. And then towards the end and throughout, I will be making a clear argument for the need for unity based on some historical events that I'm about to share with you. Maybe you have heard of them, but I just want to make sure that I get my point of view out on why I have a Black first ideology. History tells a story, and ultimately, you can't run from your own history. And so, you know, I unfortunately or fortunately, I might rub a few people the wrong way, based on history and my perspective. But let there be no doubt, my perspective is based on a method of coming up with research to clearly dissect things. And so let me continue, right? What I'm about to do is connect the dots, and I'm going to try my very best to go in chronological order in terms of history, in terms of events that shape reality, the reality that we live here in America right now, us as Africans. So, first off, as we clearly know, the first European settlers, they came in North America. They arrived Jamestown in 1607. That's documented. Those were British settlements. But then 12 years later, the first Africans that were brought here, they were prisoners of war. And that was in 1619. It's documented that these Africans was prisoners of war and not necessarily um, brought here for the purpose of enslavement. They were enslaved due to being captured. And here's my receipt. Say, show us the receipts, right? I'm gonna show you the receipt right after this slide, connecting the dots. Now, in 1607, when they got here, they were initially searching for gold. They didn't find very much. They didn't find any. They found some, but not much. So they had to find other ways to make the land profitable. And tobacco in them times that was their cash crop, right? Indentured servitude was their labor force. And what they come to find out over time was that their indentured servitude force was running away. And so they had to start paying insurance. And they could not satisfy the cost of the insurance as well as the passage for indentured servitude. And so this is why, slavery was, slowly over time going to be considered as the primary source of labor. Because of the runaways, this also produced unreliable crops. For people who don't know, tobacco is a labor intensive crop. And with runaways and an unreliable crop, ultimately they could not meet market demands to make it profitable for them. And then to add on to that, they met resistance with the indigenous Native American tribes here. So the importance of Africans being brought here as skilled labor, because they needed blacksmiths, they needed farmers, they needed the knowledge on how to grow these crops. And this was already um, shown and proven in West Africa. So they already knew that these enslaved people that they were bringing here were skilled laborers. All right, moving on. So, next point I want to bring out, like I said, this was a process. We weren't just brought here and then boom, it was slavery. First person in history that I want to point out is John Punch. Now, John Punch, this happened in 1640. Like I said, I'm trying to go in chronological order. John Punch was an African who lived in the colony of Virginia as an indentured servant. In 1640, John Punch ran away from his indentured servitude with two European indentured servants, and they got caught. Now, the Virginia's Council of Governors at that time, as you notice, they don't have a House of Burgesses yet. It's the Governor's Council. They sentenced John Punch to serve the remainder of his servitude for life. That's what his punishment was, right? But in contrast, the two white boys, the two Europeans, they just got a longer servitude, but they didn't permanently lose their freedom. John Punch did. And so many historians in academia and people who actually didn't study history know that John Punch is considered the first official enslaved person in the English colonies. All right. So you got to follow me now, right? Because I'm talking about history. Like I said, this is a process, right? You got Africans, one of these things just don't belong. They look a little different. They got some other Africans there. These are Moors, right? And the Moors, they are more civilized because they done been there a few years. Now they can speak English. And more than likely, they were traders. But connecting the dots, remember I said that I got some receipts. You know, this is the receipt. This you'll see this in Virginia. I'm not gonna read it word for word, but towards the end, last sentence, it say, from this beginning, the institution of slavery evolved. During the 17th century, as the Virginia colonists extended the length of service of 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 service for Africans from a fixed term to life. The United States abolished slavery in 1865. First receipt right there now. So I'm not making anything up. This is not just my opinion, it's my scholarly opinion. I can infer based on the fact that I have all sides of the story, but this is an absolute fact right here. Right? So moving on. It's a key turning point. So John Punch is the first official slave, 1614. And then you have the growing need for labor, right? And so tensions start to boil and grow. And this is what I'm about to show you, and it's called Bacon's Rebellion, and it takes about 30 years after John Punch. And these are the causes for Bacon's Rebellion, right? Many of the indentured servants died before their service was rendered. And so imagine if you in camp, you with your homie, right? Your homie takes sick. They don't have the best medical care in 1670, 1660, you see. So it's almost a death sentence if you get cold, if you get sick while you in the English colonies. Because they don't have the best medical care, right? And then on top of that, right, it's a good deal for the guys that's paying for they travel over here because they don't have to give you any land if you die before your service is rendered, right? And this is before, right? This is before the actual rebellion, right? There were not many women for the men to cohabitate with. Now imagine now, like I told you, growing tobacco is labor intensive. And so if it's no women after a hard day's working, you just struggling and striving, and you owe this man another 3 years. Imagine you done broke a bone, twist an ankle real bad, got a hip pointer out there, you got arthritis. And if you European, they don't know about melanoma yet. Damn, right? Next thing, the settlement outside of Jamestown, where they lived at, was under constant raid and constant attack and constant threat from the indigenous Native Americans. They didn't live in downtown Jamestown where the governor and the wealthy and the landowners live. They live near the Indians. So they under stress, family. It's like they live in the hood and the ops is around the corner, you feel me? Yeah, right? And so they telling the governor, man, look, Joe, the ops around here, man, we need to go after them. The governor at the time, his name is William Barclay. I know it looked like it's spelled Berkeley, but it's pronounced Barclay. He was reluctant to attack the neighboring native tribes. Well, why, Brother Rob? Why he ain't want to attack them? It wasn't because he was benevolent and was trying to win them over and trying to be nice. It was because he had his fur trading business going. That's why. And so eventually, this leads to Bacon's rebellion. Now, it's other factors that are involved. You will hear other historians talk about. Those were contributing factors. I can't overlook those, right? But the price of tobacco fell. So imagine you working hard as hell and you gonna get less money for it, right? No available land. You didn't finish your indentured servitude, and the landowner talking about, I got you. Because the price of tobacco fell, it made the taxes go higher. Why? Because the wealthy and the elite, they not taking any L's. Because the price drop, man, that's coming out your pot. That ain't coming out they pot. That's coming out your pot. Then with the lack of education, um, it's no social mobility. They have no way to move up. All they can really do is labor and die. So those are other contributing factors, right? But Bacon's rebellion, this is what happened. All right, now it done kicked off, right? So his name, and this is who the rebellion is named after. His name was Nathaniel Bacon. He led a rebel attack on some neighboring Native American tribes after he burnt down the native tribes and killed them up, right? Men, women, and children. Then he went into Jamestown and burned down Jamestown, drove out the governor and the other wealthy elites and everything, right? So let me tell you a little bit about Nathaniel Bacon. He was an ambitious young man. He had a woman, you know, he had some means. But the reason he led this rebellion, if you will, the main reason, if you study Nathaniel Bacon, it wasn't because he was ultra noble. He just got in where he could fit in. And the people, they felt like it was time to rise up. And because he was so ambitious, they just made him the leader. Y'all looking at the picture? This is them going to the governor's house. This is a artist depiction. It's from that period. You know, you see, you see the brother right there. You see him? He right there in the front. You see him with the red suit on. Hmm. Okay, so Nathaniel Bacon, they done took Jamestown, right? And soon after, a couple of months after, a year after, Bacon dies of dysentery. You know, he dies of dysentery. And dysentery, basically you got diarrhea, you just keep on going and going and going, and you end up bleeding from the inside, you know, out. It's terrible. But anyway, by him dying, that makes the rebellion die. And then Barkley, he comes in and he gets, uh, you know, control, military and political control back over the colony, right? And by this time, they have now formed their House of Burgess, right? And they ruled after the rebellion that slavery will be exclusively for Africans. And I explain, and that it would be for life. And then they had a law that they had floated around for some years, but they heavily enforced it after the rebellion that all children would inherit the legal status of the mother, right? But that picture, one more time, just want to point out the brother. Now, more than likely, this brother was a Moor, right? And what Nathaniel Bacon, what made it appealing to Africans, they're serving their indentured servitude. What made it appealing was Nathaniel Bacon was promising freedom for everybody after the rebellion, right? So the House of Burgess. Remember, they was sitting around, they making all of these plans. All right, we gon' we gonna make sure that all slaves from now on they gonna be exclusively African, exclusively. Remember that Moor I was telling you about, right? There go another brother. This is an artist depiction from the House of Burgess, 1678. The picture, right? But there go another brother, right? Brother, more than likely he is a Moor, right? And we got men that are free in the British colonies at this time, and he's there. He's listening, and he hear what they saying about the African. You know, he's at the table, if you will. You know how people be saying you got to have a seat at the table. Well, we had a seat at the table. The picture in the bottom right hand corner, that's the House of Burgess. That is where those people met at. That's their coat of arms right there. Mhm. So the evolution of slavery, I'm just recapping now, right? So although the first Africans that were brought here were enslaved, they were prisoners of war. And remember John Punch, right? He's considered the first official enslaved person here in the British colonies, right? Now, the House of Burgess, I'm about to give you the why. The why on why they said it's for Africans only. Slavery. European runaways, they could easily blend in to society. They run away, they stay with their cousin. Oh yeah, this is my cousin. I paid for him to come. He was staying in Richmond for a couple of weeks, and now he's come down. You know what I mean? Yeah, so they could blend in. right? Slave labor was more profitable to the landowners. All they had to pay for was the slave. Pay for him one time, get a life worth of work out of him. It was more profitable to him. Native American labor was not an option, and they had a labor intensive cash crop, and the market demands continued to grow. And like I said, because it was labor intensive, you needed a numerous amount of laborers, right? And those laborers normally, after a while, became exclusively Africans. Those Africans who took up arms with Bacon, like I told y'all, they were promised freedom. As a result of Bacon's rebellion, what the House of Burgess did, devious. They made whiteness a step up in society. Hey, I might not be the governor, I might not be wealthy, but at least I'm above Native Americans and them Africans. They made whiteness a step up. Like I said, it was for life. They made it African only. And then key point here, if you were African runaway, you're going to easily stand out in everyday society. Easily. Right? Under this system, like I said, children inherited the legal status of the mother. And so this is how the evolution of slavery became African only. So I'm going to go a little further. And so that's 1676. Now, I want to make sure that I say this out loud before I continue to go. This list that I'm producing is not comprehensive to the point where I'm covering every single event, but the events that I'm covering shape things in these three categories. It's either going to be politically, economically, or socially. One more time, politically, economically, or socially. All right. So now let me go to Stono Rebellion. This is 1739. You know, a lot of people are not familiar with Stono Rebellion. When I bring it up, you can see the blanks in their face. But 1739, it's also called Cato's Conspiracy or Cato's Rebellion. This is where a young enslaved African led a rebellion in the colony of South Carolina. So it was the biggest enslaved uprising to date in the British main colonies. 1739. Cato, he's also referred to as Jimmy, but we refer to him as Cato. That was his Congolese name, and he led about 20 enslaved Congolese in an armed march south on the Stono River. That's why it's called Stono's Rebellion. And along the way, they did murder a few whites. The numbers are somewhat cloudy. You know, some numbers say 15, some numbers say 5, some numbers say as many as 24. So because they are all over the place, that's why I don't give an exact number. Um, but he recruited nearly 60 other enslaved Africans and killed whites on the way, but they were intercepted and defeated by the South Carolina militia. So the reason why I bring up Stono's Rebellion, right? The Negro Act is passed a year later in South Carolina. In South Carolina, for people who don't know, they have a major trading port, Charleston. And Charleston, they carry weight. Those wealthy individuals that own Charleston, they carry weight in the British colonies. And so this is why it's important that you understand that if a move is made in South Carolina, people gonna follow suit because these is where the guys got the bread, if you did, right? So um, um, in response to the rebellion, right, they made it illegal now for the enslaved to move abroad. And what I mean by that is move from colony to colony without their master, right? They couldn't move no more without their master, right? They couldn't assemble in groups anymore. They couldn't raise their own food anymore. And all money that they earned, their master had to hold it. They couldn't hold their own money anymore. And then they made it illegal for slaves to write, for the enslaved to write. They didn't make it illegal for reading, but they did make it illegal for writing. Reading, I'm assuming, had something to do with them being able to perform their duties and go to the market and things of that nature for their oppressors, right? Um, and then it was encouraged for oppressors to kill rebellious slaves. Um, and that remained effective until the end of the Civil War. The next major event is Gabriel Prosser's rebellion, and this happens in 1800. He had planned the rebellion all spring, all summer. And then towards the end of the summer, August 30th, he was planning to go ahead and start the rebellion. But it was raining and it rained really, really bad. And so they postponed it until the following day or until it stopped raining, right? That gave two of the slaves the opportunity to go and tell the oppressor about Gabriel Prosser's plan. His oppressor went and told the governor, who called out the militia, and of course the militia come and they put it down. Gabriel Prosser is able to escape. He does escape down the river, but he is spotted and betrayed by another slave. He thought he was gonna get the $300. That's what was offered by the state, but the slave that did betray our brother, he only got the $50, right? And so Gabriel Prosser, along with his two brothers and 23 of the other enslaved Africans that were planning the rebellion, were all hung, right? After the rebellion, though, and this is them just tightening those screws. They greatly restricted the enslaved from rising up again, and it was talk of another rebellion 2 years later that they put down, right? And so no travel when they wasn't working, none whatsoever. It was prohibited, right? They did regular sweeps of the enslaved holding communities, regular sweeps, looking for any semblance of planning a rebellion or anything like that, right? They banned hiring out your enslaved. They banned it, right? And then if you was a freedman, you had 1 calendar year to be in any given colony, and then you had to move around. They didn't want you to feel like you was at home there, right? They didn't want you to put down no roots there, right? So you had 1 calendar year. It's very important, right? Around that time, around that same time, The Haitian Revolution. These images that you see. I imagine this is what those oppressors were imagining in their mind in the United States. And let me point out one more time for those that might just be joining us. This is a presentation told from a strictly Black perspective, right? And so those Haitians, when they revolted, rebelled, and got their freedom, it led to uneasiness here. It instilled so much fear. They killed so many slaves during this time period. The Southern slaveholders, they felt like if word got to their slaves that it might happen in the United States, and they were taking extra precautions, more patrols, more slave catchers, less church. It's heavily documented during this period. You know, the United States, Thomas Jefferson at this time, he was very reluctant to continue trading with Haiti. The French, they wanted him to stop altogether, right? But the Southern slaveholders, they had money interests, because Haiti was very profitable piece of property down there in the Caribbean, right? And so those are things that we have to consider, especially when we're talking about understanding history and context. What I'm showing you basically is that people might tell you the story, but you got to understand it from your point of view. I'm sure you can find some stories where Thomas Jefferson is speaking against slavery out loud. That's what he's saying out loud. But behind closed doors, not so much. Not so much. Right? So I'm just talking about the reactions now to the Haitian Revolution. We understand what happened, right? But I'm talking about the United States reaction, right? Like I told you, Jefferson, he supported the continuation of slavery in private, right? And Dessalines, he sent him a letter asking for them to have closer ties. Thomas Jefferson ignored the letter. Look, this is probably the most important development because of the Haitian Revolution. It enabled the Louisiana Purchase. I'm going to show you a picture of it in a second. The Haitian Revolution doubled the size of America for $15 million after Napoleon pulled out of the Caribbean. He sold New Orleans and the land that was ceded. He sold that for $15 million. In today's money, fam, that's $341 million. That's about the cost of 2 starting pitchers. Or maybe you can get you an outfielder and 2 good setup guys. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? But $340 million is not a lot of money. It doubled the size of America. So if somebody helped you double the size of your country, wouldn't you treat them fairly, favorably? You don't have to follow me. We don't have I don't have to play games. I can say this out loud. The United States was ungrateful to Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines. They were ungrateful for these men's noble stand if nothing else, against one of the most heinous crimes in the history of humanity. But then on top of that, it was a bonus for you because you got to double the size of your country for peanuts. France had put a lot of pressure on a newly formed country. Keep in mind, they just ratified the Constitution in 1789. The United States is still young. France is putting that pressure on America to end the trade with Haiti. Thomas Jefferson, he agreed to stop selling them guns and ammunition, but he wouldn't give up the trade for non-contraband goods, though. The United States refused to acknowledge Haiti's independence until 1862. It's the middle of the Civil War. This is what Dessalines and Toussaint Louverture did for America, did for themselves. This is what they got for $15 million. Look at that. 15 million. Come on, man. Hey, if somebody do that for you, man, you supposed to look out for them, Joe. That's what's supposed to happen, right? But moving along, right? This 1815 now. Christoph Miners. He wrote a book. It's called The Outline of History of Mankind. Miners, he split mankind into two divisions. One of his divisions, the beautiful white race. The other division, the ugly black race. He considered ugly races inferior, immoral, and animal-like. These are some of the things that Mr. Miner said about the Negro race. He said we felt less pain. He's a leading scientist. He's an influencer, if you will. Leading scientist of his day. He said we felt less pain. Do you think that might have added to the brutality of chattel slavery? A leading scientist of the day saying that Negroes felt less pain and lacked emotions. He said the Negro had thick nerves, and so it made us less sensitive. He said that we was the least human of all men. He noticed that the Negro skull is larger scientifically. African skulls are slightly larger. He said that our brains were smaller, actually, but our skulls are larger, and our brains are actually slightly larger than other races. He said we was an unhealthy race, poor diet, and things of that nature. We lack morals. Basically, um, by examining the Negro and him being a scientist, and he noticed how endowed we were. He said that we had unduly sex drives. He thought that we were erect when we weren't. Uh, Things of that nature. Um, Look, right? It's just nature. If you are endowed with, um, you know, things that are alluring to the other sex, right? You become more viable to be able to reproduce. It's nature, right? Our women, they are more fertile, right? And they more thick, they more voluptuous, if you will, right? Our men, I don't know about other men. I don't be looking at other men's business, if you will, right? But you know, this is a rumor. They said that we blessed. I tend to believe so. Yes, sir. But these are the roots of scientific racism, right? Moving along, 1815. Now we 15 years later. David Walker's appeal. I don't know why a lot of historians tend to overlook the impact and the eloquent nature of David Walker's arguments and David Walker's appeal. But politically and socially, David Walker's appeal had some large effects on all of the colonies. A sailor was found with David Walker's appeal sewn to the inside of his coat. And this is how the Europeans found out about David Walker's appeal, right? But in David Walker's appeal, of course, he is calling for Africans being enslaved to rise up against their oppressors. Historians argue that he inspired Nat Turner's rebellion, and it's entirely feasible. I mean, they didn't have the internet, and it wasn't like their oppressors was like, here go today's paper. They'd take a break in the field, here go today's paper, and then a lot of them couldn't read anyway, were illiterate, and so it might have took a year, from word of mouth, 2 years, word of mouth, to get to Nat Turner. So that's entirely feasible to believe that David Walker's appeal, inspired Nat Turner. And after David Walker's appeal, there were new laws that were passed 1831, 32, all in all of the colonies, basically prohibiting enslaved Africans from reading and writing, right? And so then we fast forward a few years later, United States Congress. A lot of things have happened in the United States Congress. A lot of things have happened. I'm gonna try to my best to shorten this up, but I want to talk about a very pivotal character in Congress around this time, 18 mid 1830s, leading up to the Civil War. His name was John C. Calhoun, and he was pro-slavery and for states' rights, right? And so John C. Calhoun needs to be understood properly in context from a Black first perspective, right? We all know that Andrew Jackson was no hero to Black folks or Native Americans, and probably overall just wasn't a good man in terms of character. And on his deathbed, President Andrew Jackson, when asked if he had anything that he had done in life he had left undone, the two things he said he didn't do: I didn't shoot Henry Clay, and I didn't hang John C. Calhoun. Who is Henry Clay? Henry Clay was a man in Congress that decided to have high taxes, and he made sure that the government had a lot of money on deposit so that we could get high credit margins to be able to make large investments in industrialization. Henry Clay had a vision, and it didn't line up with Andrew Jackson's vision. Um, and then John C. Calhoun, we're gonna continue to talk about him, but that's who Henry Clay was. If not for Henry Clay, the United States would not have had the credit in order to take advantage of the Louisiana Purchase. All right, but continuing. One more thing Andrew Jackson said about John C. Calhoun. If you succeed from my nation, I will secede your head from the rest of your body. Andrew Jackson was not playing with this man. He did not like John C. Calhoun. Now, John C. Calhoun, when he was talking about states' rights, basically he was arguing that, if you in a free state, you literally cannot tell me what laws to enforce in a state where I have slavery. Literally. Y'all mind y'all business. We good. You know what I'm saying? We got slavery. Y'all don't. And y'all not about to tell us how to live. He is kind of the poster boy, if you will, for that initial argument in Congress. But for people who study history and study the Illuminati, right? This next quote might make John C. Calhoun seem like a hero, if you will. This is what John C. Calhoun say in Congress regarding the so-called Illuminati. He say a power has arisen up in the government greater than the people themselves, consisting of many and various powerful interests, combined in one mass and held together by the comprehensive power of the vast surplus in banks. So he's forecasting what's about to happen with these robber barons, and I mean he was right. He was right in a general sense, but you know, like I said, you gotta look deep sometimes into the rabbit hole to really see somebody's character, right? You gotta keep watching, right? You gotta understand that when people put, I'm sure if I gave you $20, you would happily take it, right? But if you knew what Andrew Jackson did in Florida, man, you would be shocked that his picture is on a $20 bill. I'm not surprised that the Treasury Department has decided to replace his image because he is not a good man. And neither was John C. Calhoun. John C. Calhoun, these are his words regarding slavery. Many in the South once believed that slavery was a moral and a political evil. That folly and delusion are gone. We see it now in its true light and regard it as most safe and stable basis for free institutions in the world. He regarded looking at slavery as a moral and a political evil as silly and crazy. That man, hey, we don't believe that. In his argument, he brung in a lot of politicians that respected him, and he held a lot of positions in the government. You got to understand his significance, John C. Calhoun. I might have spent a little too much time on that slide. I ain't mean to spend that much time, so I'm gonna speed up if that's okay. Right? The Fugitive Slave Act, or it's also wrapped into some legal language, the Compromise at 1850. While I'm talking, please take a look at those fugitive slave posters, if you will. Right? And so the Fugitive Slave Act, real quick, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3 in the U.S. Constitution states to return slaves to their slaveholders. That is 1793. Many of the northern states, they didn't want to enforce that law in any great magnitude. They disregarded the law in a lot of ways. It don't make them good. They just disregarded the law. So when they passed the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, it's a lot of things that happened in Congress. I done ran out of time. I don't want to. I can explain it if people want to expound on it. But basically, when they passed this law, if you did not enforce the law, you would be penalized, right? And you could get fined up to $1,000. In today's money, that's $30,000 in today's money. Any person that was found aiding and abetting, right, with food and shelter, you would get 6 months in jail and the fine. Now I want to point out real quick with these posters. The first one, this is one that they was posting in Philadelphia. It was a heads up poster. Hey, look, Joe, they coming. Let's be ready. And then the one in the bottom right, that's actually Uncle Tom, the Tom from Uncle Tom's Cabin. That was his wanted poster right there. You know, a fugitive slave, the highest one I done seen was $300, right, for a fugitive slave to catch one. Then we have to talk about the importance of the Dred Scott decision, right? This 1857. The Supreme Court ruled. I ain't talking about no appellate court and all that. I ain't talking that. This the Supreme Court. They ruled that the U.S. Constitution did not intend to include Black people as American citizens. It didn't matter if they was enslaved or if they was free. 1857. The reason that he did it, right, Chief Justice Taney, he had a bunch of homies that was about to make a whole bunch of money on Western expansion. And they thought that with Western expansion, they could do it faster with what? Chattel slavery. We gotta understand the political meaning of history. That's what the master teacher taught us. Look, this U.S. Supreme Court decision is a major contributing factor to the outbreak of the Civil War. And the Dred Scott decision historically is considered the worst decision that the Supreme Court has ever made. And this is why. The Supreme Court justice at the time, the Chief Justice, Roger Taney. And there you go. There you go. I want you to see his face. Before I read this quote, I want you to see his face. They had, for more than a century, before been regarded as being as an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations. And so far inferior, they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. This opinion was at the time fixed and universal in the civilized portion of the white race. Roger Taney, y'all. 1857, y'all. 5 years before the start of the Civil War. Next, I want to talk about the influence of Charles Darwin or Darwinism. Now, Charles Darwin, he mostly gets credit for this book right here, The Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection. For people who are not familiar with Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection, in a nutshell, the strong survive. And so Darwinism, if you hear people use this term, basically what they saying is, because I can dominate you, it gotta be right. Charles Darwin, regarded as a great scientist, but also a great racist, a supreme racist. At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of men will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. At the same time, the anthropomorphous apes will no doubt be exterminated. Now, this is a book that, you know, a lot of people are not familiar with. It's called The Descent of Man. This is where he spouts off all of these racist ideas. This is what people are thinking about in the back of their mind as they go into that conference in Berlin. When they sitting around the table thinking about eugenics. One of the people from the eugenics movement, he's related to who? Charles Darwin. So his influence, it cannot be overlooked. Like I said, what I'm talking about is major events in history that shape the reality in which we live here in the United States of America. Major events. And so now, what am I talking about now? I'm here. It's the end of the Civil War. I could go into the Civil War and all of them types of things. I'm not gonna go into all of that history. But what I am talking about is at the end of slavery, also referred to as the peculiar institution. First thing about slavery, it is the most heinous act against one ethnic group in human history. Human history. The amount of our ancestors that died. Innumerable. Innumerable. It stripped enslaved Africans of their humanity, culture, history, customs, names, families, religions, education, identity, property ownership, intellectual property ownership, and also, but not limited to, the right to compete in international business affairs, which has shaped global markets still echoing to this day. At the end of slavery, what else are we dealing with? During slavery, men and women were both raped, and the psychological damage of being taken advantage of reverberates. You know, as they say, hurt people hurt people. On that one, y'all got to read between the lines. But hurt people hurt people. There's a legacy that come out of this. This is That's why I had to collect my thoughts for a second. This is one of the most I mean, you can't imagine doing this. You can't imagine doing this to your worst enemy in some cases. You rape a woman that you consider your property. And in this ungodly lack of humanity relationship, a child is born. Your child, you know it's yours. How could you enslave your own children in some cases? You have to be diabolical in nature to enslave your own children. I could do a whole presentation on the diabolical nature of slavery. The rest of the world, for the most part, have outlawed slavery by 1807. And so the importation of slaves here in America was also outlawed in 1807. It is documented breeding farms and that they bred us for the purpose of enslaved labor. 58 years, 1807 to 1861. Slavery also depopulated the continent of Africa, leaving mostly women, destabilizing the continent for decades to come. In doing so, and by having us in such a binding position with the lack of development, lack of opportunities to actually tell our story until uh, towards the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. Uh, we clearly see it though, and it is still going today, an ongoing negative propaganda campaign on the image of Africans in mass media in all phases. Mass incarceration after the Civil War, after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, 1964, ongoing, ongoing. The end of slavery, though. Lack of adequate medical care. And then imagine 1866 now. The U.S. Constitution, they say you are free, but you are not welcome to go to a hospital that is owned and operated by Europeans, by white people. You are not welcome in there. So the lack of adequate medical care. I mean, you know, I just can't see how we can't see my point. I'm gonna make my point clear though. After this, slavery, without us having the ability to read and write, it stripped Africans from the social commentary of history. And in some cases, that to me, that is the largest part of this. It stripped us from the social commentary of history. A systematic, intrinsic, bias-led effort has been and continues to be applied to make Africans a permanent underclass even after the end of slavery. And so right here, I'm gonna end off right here. I don't want to, at the end of the day, I would love to keep going, right? but I want to make sure that I want to make sure that I uh, I don't overdo it, you know. So I'm gonna have a part two to this. I'm gonna have a part two to this, and I don't want to overdo it. So I'm gonna have a part two to this, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna start back up with a couple of other points. But the reason why I'm showing all of these things to be very clear, since those first enslaved Africans that were brought here as prisoners of war, all the way up until the end of the Civil War, as you can clearly see, as I pointed out, there was never a time when they was gonna square it up with us. It has been ongoing, exclusively against us, exclusively. All of the pressure, all of the societal pressure that you can put on the people, socially, mentally, spiritually, politically, sexually, anything and everything that you could do. I didn't even cover everything, but the damn evidence that I put for those people that were either enacting those laws, enforcing those laws, or sitting complicit, sitting silent, that makes them complicit. That makes them complicit. They agree. And what I'm saying to y'all, with everything that they have done to us, and that's just up to 1865, can't you see that we have no friends? John Henry Clark was right. We have no friends. We have no friends. And the need for unity always will be and will continue to be paramount. Look, you can choose to be a Christian, you can choose to be a Muslim, you can choose to be a Moor, identify as a Moor, you know, you a Democrat, you a Republican, you conservative, you liberal, you a gangster. You can be all of those things that you choose to be. But the one thing you don't choose is what the Creator created you to be while you were in the womb. You, sir, you, ma'am, are an African. That's what you are. It's nothing that I can do to change that. What I'm telling you is to embrace who you are. You have no choice, because you can go to the Democratic convention, but because you don't have an agenda that has been generated out of the unity of our community, you go there as an individual, and it will not benefit anybody. It will not benefit anybody. Because even if you thought it benefited you, I'm sure it came with some strings attached. So With that, what I'm hoping that y'all do that heard me tonight. With that, I hope that you come back. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna continue to push through the information. I don't want to inundate the listening audience with so much information to where it becomes, mundane. But this information I'm talking about, all of this stuff is important. And a lot of y'all don't know. Y'all know y'all don't know. And it's okay to say you don't know. It's okay. Everybody don't know everything. Everybody don't know everything. I know I don't know everything, right? But with that, I'm gonna end off there. Um, if you got questions, comments, concerns, man, I'm willing and able, to address them the next time I come up on this next live and present the information. You can't refute what I'm saying. It's no way to refute it because it's history. You can't refute it. It already happened. I'm just reporting out on it. It already happened. They can't run from their history, right? I'm just reporting out on it, right? But with that, I'm grateful and honored that people came over to listen to me tonight. You know, um, I really didn't take a look at the chat, but I'm grateful and honored that y'all came to listen. I'm gonna come back with more information tomorrow, leading up to continue to make my point. And at the end, I guarantee you, I got some options. I got some solutions. I ain't just running my mouth talking about what these people did done to us. What I'm doing is I'm making the argument that they've already done it. They've already showed us that they not going to work with us. They continue to prove it. And so the time for unity, and this is the reason why I'm saying it, the time for unity is now. All right, thank y'all so much for listening. I respect everybody that came to give me an ear. And until next time, I'm signing off.